May I have a motion to open the public discussion?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
May I have a roll call?
Ms. Buckley?
Yes.
Dr. Dobrin?
Yes.
Mr. Nessie?
Yes.
Mr. Manginelli?
Yes. This is the time where the public may comment on any topic of their choice. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. At this time, I would like to ask the clerk for any public comments were submitted prior to this meeting by email.
There were none.
Okay, let's get started with the public comments.
Good evening. My name is Michael Stanton. I live at 9 Bowles Lane in Tinton Falls. Council President, may I approach and hand the Borough Clerk some pictures to be distributed to the Council?
Kevin, is that permissible?
Sure. Yeah, do that. Thank you.
As I said, my name is Michael Stanton. I live at 9 Bowles Lane, Tinton Falls. My wife and I have lived here for over 30 years and raised our 6 daughters here. Ruffin Cemetery is a historic cemetery with a rich history and a deep sentiment for descendants of our first Tinton Falls families. That area was a First Nation burial ground and used as a local cemetery long before land was organized into block and lots, and even before the Pine Brook Cemetery was established in 1852. The Ruffin Cemetery lot now occupies part of that land and became a family cemetery for the Ruffins, Reeves, Rocks, Berries, and a few others. 18 years ago, in 2005, Mr. Chickalese came and attempted to take over the cemetery and operate as a commercial cemetery using whatever tricks he could. I believe his plans even included building a crematorium on site. It was opposed by the Ruffin family and others, and the New Jersey Cemetery Board started investigating. However, at the end of 2005, it suddenly dropped all mention of the Ruffin Cemetery, and we thought the matter was resolved and the cemetery was going to continue to just be a family cemetery. For over a decade, everything was quiet, and then 5 years ago, he started burying bodies and interring remains. As several groups have organized cleanups of the Pine Brook and Ruffin cemeteries over the years, I assumed activity I heard back there last year was just that. I was mistaken, and the activity actually has been and continues to be the clearing of trees to prepare for burying thousands, many coming from New York City. As you can see, the community is concerned and some are outraged that this could happen. There are zoning, environmental, health, historic, and legal concerns, but frankly, what of human decency and respect? He bullied his way in and is pushing everything aside to make a quick buck. I asked the council to thoroughly investigate the travesties here and find a solution that protects the safety, welfare, and character of this community and restores dignity to the Ruffin, Reeve, Rock, and Berry families members buried in the Ruffin Cemetery. Thank you.
My name is Ken Scarano. I live on number 1 Macameni Lane. I can't even say it half the time. It's kind of weird spelling. My property, I might be lot 11. My property is on the edge of that cemetery. When I first bought that house, there was a few graves back there, like a pauper's field. Since I've been there less than a year, hundreds of bodies have been buried back there. I watch a backhoe dig a hole, wrap a chain around a pine box, and just dump them in the ground. The odd thing is, I never see a minister or a priest or a rabbi pray over those bodies. They're just dumped in the ground. Now, I took the time to look up the law regarding cemeteries. And believe it or not, the state of New Jersey has a law. It's Title 45, Chapter 27-17. And that law, let me put my glasses on. I want to read this whole thing. I might paraphrase some of it. But before a single body is buried back there, and one thing that should be considered is that a public cemetery or a private cemetery? I've heard from some people it's a private cemetery. Well, guess what? You can't sell a plot in a private cemetery. Well, then if it's a public cemetery, it has to have a survey map, which it can't have because some of those bodies are buried on my property. A survey map with a use described for the purposes, and there's supposed to be a filing of this map that includes which plots are where, and also includes roadways to get in between the paths for these things. There's no path between any of those. And this map is supposed to be available for inspection. Now, this is the old story. If you give somebody an inch, they take a yard. That thing is expanding all the time. And guess what? You can't expand a cemetery without your approval. And you have to have a resolution approving the expansion of that cemetery. So, I mean, I don't know what law they're not violating over there, but you're the ones who are in charge. And I don't care who, because I happened to be over there when hearing something about a court order. You can't give a court order for something that violates the law. So that's all bogus. And, you know, I don't know if I mentioned it enough, but I am a combat veteran. And I served with people I retired in 2012. And I led a special forces operation in Iraq when I was over 50. And watched a lot of young men do what they were asked to do at the risk of their lives. And I'm thinking there's some people who are not taking much of a risk, but just need to enforce the law to protect the community around them. You know, I've got a million things in here about the different laws and stuff like that, but I'll just leave it at that. There's supposed to be a survey map of that land and where those plots are. And they're not supposed to be, first off, if there was one, they're not supposed to extend it without your approval. So it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Gary Herview, 10 Blueberry Lane, 30-year resident in the Sterling Forest development. I'm just here to echo a lot of my neighbors and fellow residents, mainly about our concerns that we have. We don't have a lot of answers. Some facts, maybe some facts still need to be determined, but we have a lot of questions and concerns. This is our neighborhood. We've been good residents. We're behind the Stavola asphalt plant. We deal with the noise. We deal with Route 18. We've had that cemetery there. I believe it's a lot of local families and Civil War and some Native Americans back there. And it's been very dormant for 30 years. Now, all of a sudden, we have trees coming down on a daily basis. We have bodies from New York City being buried, God knows where they're coming from, in our beautiful neighborhood behind where we live. And I think it's important for the township, the council, to let us know as residents as to whether or not you share those concerns, and if you're willing to put maybe the attorney that you have to work to maybe fight on our behalf. If it is a state matter, whether it's the Attorney General, whether it's the Cemetery Commission, whatever the case may be. Don't know. I don't pretend to know who has jurisdiction. All I know is every day we hear the chainsaws, there's digging, there's burying, there's trees coming down. So we want to get your attention. And if I could just have a raise of hands, who's here for this issue? Thank you. I implore you to take action.
My name is Carrie Jones, and my address is 73 Cedar Avenue, Apartment 1, Long Branch. I am a direct descendant of Cynthia Ruffin and John Brock and the cemetery. We have gone to court with Mr. Louis Chicalis. My cousin Jean Ruffin was going to court with him first, and it was all about getting Louis off the property. If you look at the Board of Cemeteries records from May of 2005, it was questioned to the Board of Cemetery, who has jurisdiction over the cemetery? And there was no answer. I have proof in here that Louis Chicalis went and started putting letterheads under Ruffin Cemetery in 2004. When you look through the Board of Cemeteries, I printed out every month from 2002 to 2022, and there was never any clear, Louis Chicalis, you have permission to do this. I have paperwork from my aunts where they had attorneys And even in 2008, they were telling Louis Chicalis they wanted no parts of him. They did not want him on our cemetery. They wanted nothing to do with him. In July of 2005, my cousin, Jean Ruffin, got a cease to desist and just finished going to court with Louis Chicalis in 2022 of February. When I realized that Jean Ruffin was going to make a consent agreement giving this man property, rights to be on our property, not as owner, but as operator. I've been out at the cemetery. I have called Tinton Falls Police, and they've come out there, and his workers were told to leave and to leave me in peace because they come harassing me while I'm out there visiting the grave. At the time, I also had a order to show cause against Louis Chicalis that was, the judgment was done July 1st of 2022. The judgment said, we as Ruffin heirs, which I have several family members here, they said we could not stop Jean from making a consent agreement with him, which when Jean was making the agreement, it was for the Ruffins to have 50 graves and this and that, and Louis to do X, Y, and Z. By the time Mr. Chicalis wrote that paper up and Jean signed it, he took blanket, never says anything about ownership. If you look at the taxation papers for 2022, it is still owned by the Ruffin heirs. The only reason why Louis Chicalis had to make a consent agreement with Jean is because Jean is an owner. 3 things happened also in that judgment. The judge said, as well as Jean couldn't speak for us, we could not stop Jean from making this agreement, but we, the rest of the Ruffin heirs, have rights, and we are going back into court to do an order to show cause for him to give us a consent agreement. We don't want Mr. Chicalis on our property. We never have. Our property has been in Eatontown, New Jersey since 1774. This is what Mr. Chicalis' attorney said when he wrote this letter to the Board of Cemeteries, where I filed 2 complaints, and the reason why they bumped it down is because now, since my cousin Jean Ruffin made a consent agreement with him, he's basically given him permission to be out there. I'm with you, neighbors. I don't want him out there. I met with this gentleman out there the day with the dog. That was the day I had to call the police on Louis Chicalis. But Louis Chicalis tells the Board of Cemeteries that not until a few local residents reached out to him seeking guidance and assistance to revise the decline of the cemetery, which clearly isn't true because these people are sitting here in this courtroom. I came here tonight without going to Freehold today to do a consent to, for him to show cause and do another cease and desist, which I sent to him back in July. I lost my daughter in May of last year. My sisters, my brother, my grandparents, great-grandparents are buried at that cemetery. And I had to bury my daughter on another cemetery because of the mess going on with Louis Chicalis. We have sat down time and time again to try to make agreements with him. He wants to put a crematorium out there. He wants to open all these roadways. And then he writes on paperwork that we didn't know what property it is. We actually know it's a whole 22 acres of property that we own back there. And it's never been touched because we never tried to run it as a full-fledged cemetery. Is it historic? Yes, we know all about that. We want to preserve it and make it historic. And we want graves for the rest of our family, not just us, the Rocks, the Reeves, the Bowles, everyone that came from out there. So trust and believe. I'm going to leave my number with everybody. I will keep you abreast of what's going on with this. But Louis Chicalis is horrible. He even had the nerve to meet with me several times and then write in this letter to the Board of Cemeteries, which I will give you, that I was trying to extort him when the judge clearly said I had a right to take him back in court. And the last filthy thing he did was he tried to introduce a doctrine of laches. That means that when you're black and you slumber your rights because you don't know the law, because you didn't do it in time, he wanted the judge to dismiss my case. The judge said, no, ma'am. He told me, Miss Jones, you're doing good for your family. Dot your I's and cross your T's. The only thing you can't do is speak for Jean, just like Jean can't speak for you. And when I sent him a cease and desist, he signed it COVID-19. This is the kind of person we're dealing with here. But trust and believe me, tomorrow I will be in Freehold, and I didn't let the Board of Cemeteries know that this meeting was going on, but anybody in here, Ellen Green is her name, and I'm going to give you her email, and you tell her, because he has them thinking that you guys are down with this, and you want this going on. And he's screaming, all Carrie wants is the money. That is my family inheritance. I would not want nothing more in my family but to put our people in mausoleums and make that a historic place back there for all to come and know where the Indians came from and the blueberries and the strawberries that were grown in Monmouth County. Okay? So enough of Mr. Louis Chickalise.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Michael DeMarco. I live at 13 Blueberry Lane. A lot of what I would have said tonight has already been stated. In just conclusion, we are asking the council to immediately restrict any further development on this land until which time a proper hearing and the effects of this expansion can be reviewed with respect to both zoning and the environmental impact to our communities. I ask the members of this council to remember that while your tenure in these positions you hold are limited, the decisions you make and the legacy you leave will have an everlasting impact on the residents of this community. It is the role of those in the community to protect it, to be good stewards of the environment, and as our elected leaders, we request you do no less in this matter. Thank you very much.
This came to my attention a couple of days ago, and I can tell you that there have been meetings, and I think it's a good time to let you know what we've discussed. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to our town administrator, and I'll let you know what we've discussed and what we can do.
Council President, if I may, I'm Kevin Starkey. I'm the borough attorney, and the Council President said he came to my attention just a few days ago, and I've been looking into it since, along with the administrator. One gentleman got up and asked a question: does the council share the concerns of the residents here? And I can tell you the answer is absolutely yes. The council president came to me and said, Kevin, please look into this, find out what we can do, what the borough can do, how we can help the residents, and how we hopefully can work together to address this. I've done some looking into this. I need to give you some background, I think, so everybody's operating on the same page. I know Ms. Oliveri got up and gave a short history of the Ruffin Cemetery, and it was for decades, maybe even more than decades, a family cemetery owned, operated by the Ruffins for their family members, for veterans, for Native Americans, for a lot of good people. In 1976, Ms. Marion Ruffin filed what's called a certificate of authority with the state of New Jersey. The reason I spoke with the Deputy Attorney General who handles this morning, she said probably the reason she did it was to try to get things in order. That's what you're supposed to do, to try to operate under the state law. And she did that. By doing that, converted the cemetery that was there from a private family cemetery into what's called a public cemetery, which brings it under the jurisdiction of the New Jersey Cemetery Board. They've had the right, the cemetery board has, and they have since 1976, exercised authority over that cemetery to review what happens there, to go out and do investigations, to look at it. Someone said that an investigator has been looking into this from 2005, and then a couple of years ago. That's the investigator for the New Jersey Cemetery Board. They have been out. The Deputy Attorney General told me that they've been looking at this, I think, for probably about 15 years now, in various aspects of it. That the Cemetery Board is the board that has the authority over public cemeteries in the state of New Jersey. Someone said we didn't get noticed from the town of anything happening out there. That's because for a large extent, we're in the same boat as you. We don't get noticed. This council and the mayor don't approve things at that cemetery. They don't approve graves going in, that we don't get notice of that happening. That all falls under the cemetery board, which is out in Trenton. Somebody asked about a survey map to tell you what's out there, what's coming out there, what they're authorized to do, and it has to be filed. That is absolutely correct. The Cemetery Act, which is a New Jersey state law, says a survey of what's out there has to be filed. And is on file, I would think. I haven't gotten it yet, but it's with the cemetery board is where it gets filed. And I intend to get a copy of that, and I'll share it with people here so you can we'll let you know what we're finding out as this goes on as well.